What's up, Dragon Brood? Today, we're going to talk some strategy. There's a few of y'all still frustrated by rogues and getting your deck milled out, whatever, and people are saying like, well, I don't know how to beat it. I don't know what my deck needs to do to compete. This deck's everywhere. What do I do? Well, you know what? We're going to address some of those issues for you, and we're going to talk about a few things. Because there are some strategies to work against it if you're running into a lot of it, whether that's in the casual queue or in the ladder or even just at your local store. There's some answers, so don't freak out. But before we get to them, I gotta ask, if you haven't, please remember to like this video, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and that just lets me know that you love what we're doing and you appreciate it, and then lets you be notified every time we have a video like this up. But let's hop into it. Let's talk how to beat rogues. Alright, first off, one of the things that's very interesting about the Dimir rogues deck particularly is that the deck doesn't seem to hold that big of a win percentage in most of the events we see. If you're looking at the results on MTG Melee or the Star City Open stuff, they actually don't seem to be winning all that much. However, the deck's still popular. And that's the thing I think is kind of perplexing to everybody. But I believe the reason is partly because the deck is pretty affordable, it's easy to play, and it gives you, in a way, kind of a false sense of security, right? Because you get flyers, you get some counter spells, you get some removal, so it can make the pilots feel very confident and comfortable, even if they're not winning the largest number of games. And it can be a bit deceiving when you get on little runs and then you lose a couple, so I understand its popularity still. Now that said, we don't really care about the popularity, you're just watching because you want to know how to beat it. Well, first things first. The most problematic card, the scariest card, the card that gives them the most advantage is Into the Story. I know you're probably thinking about the Enforcer or Soaring Thought Thief or maybe even Luris, but no, it's actually Into the Story. Think about how many times you've been playing against rogues and then the game kind of was back and forth. You killed the creature, they killed the creature, you make a thing, maybe your creatures trade, and then you don't do anything for a turn, then they draw 4 cards and they're off to the races. And it just starts snowballing after that, right? 4 cards is a lot, and 4 cards for 4 mana at that, because they're usually not paying full price for it. Well, if you have the opportunity, save a counterspell for that Into the Story. I know that sounds simple, but really, that's the biggest thing. That's the card you want to pick off. A lot of the other stuff, you have other answers in your deck to deal with, but you're not going to have much to actually do to that Into the Story. And same thing when you have the opportunity to make them discard a card. Think about how important it is to take that other thing you want to take versus taking the Into the Story. Now, there's some times where if you can manipulate the game to where you don't actually have cards in your graveyard, then they won't ever get a cheap Into the Story anyway and you don't care. But if it looks like there's any chance of that happening, sometimes your best bet is just make them discard the Into the Story right off the bat. Now, there's some other things we can talk about, right? Spot removal, great. You want to be able to kill all of the Soaring Thought Thieves and all of the Thieves Guild Enforcers. Obviously, that's easier said than done, and it's not going to be a task you can complete every game. But that being said, the way you want to kill them, if you have the choice, is with instant speed removal. And that's a big deal because it allows you to do things on their turn where they can't do stuff on your turn. They have to dedicate to countering that spell or playing another thing or whatever on their turn, which leaves you wide open to kind of do what you want. And in a way, think about it in terms of football. Actually, I guess it doesn't matter if you're talking about international soccer, football, or just American football. Think about it in the sense of you're trying to keep the ball on your opponent's side of the field, right? Just keep the pressure up that way and don't ever let them come across the midline. That's basically what we're doing here. So if you get to play on their turn, it forces them to use their resources, opens the game up for you. And particularly, you want stuff like Heartless Act, or even if you have access to it, Scorching Dragonfire. That has the other added effect of keeping them from getting stuff back with the Luris, which a lot of them are playing these days, or even returning stuff with Agadeem's Awakening. Now, I've mentioned this in some other videos before, but it can't be said enough. Escape cards are good here. And particularly, there are 2 escape cards you really want. Chainweb Arachneer and Phoenix of Ash. Those 2 are the best cards to have in these scenarios. First, because the Arachneer can just come out and can chump block for 1 mana, buy you a turn, goes to the yard, and then once it comes back, it's much larger and it's almost impossible for their flyers to punch through. You then just have to worry about something like the Enforcer once it has Death Touch. But here's the other thing, when you're getting stuff out of the graveyard with Escape, you're also reducing the cards in the yard, so it's possible that Enforcer never gets to Death Touch level anyway. And the other thing about the Phoenix is that it only requires 3 additional cards in the graveyard. So you can have a lot of games where you're getting the Phoenix back, maybe they kill it, you block a thing, maybe it dies, and then you're just cycling those cards out of your graveyard constantly so they never get those bonuses, and that's a very big deal. And the fact that the Phoenix flies does mean that there's going to be times you just get to attack and they're not going to have easy blockers. And it helps you close the game because it still pumps its power. So those are probably the 2 best cards with Escape to have in this particular matchup. They also have the added benefit of being good against the other control decks. Because one of the answers people are starting to go to are things like Dimir control, mono black, or even mono red control that we've seen. And they have a bunch of spot removal. So if you have things that are coming back, that can help you out too. Now, if you're playing a deck like, say, Doom Foretold, one of the variants with blue, it's going to be pretty easy to come up with other answers. Namely things like Mystical Dispute, because that stops Drowned in the Lock, so they can't do that efficiently. You can pick off a Soaring Thought Thief on the cheap. So it does a few different things, and honestly, like we talked about in the beginning of the video, picking off that Into the Story even when they get a discount. Don't want to understate that any way we can. But you also get something like Glass Casket or Banishing Light. They don't usually have answers to those things, and again, you're keeping something from going to the graveyard. So you remove it and it's still in play and you don't have to worry about it after that. That is a big deal. So if you have the opportunity to play those, go for it, they're solid. Now there's a whole other strategy we can talk about that's just, can you just make flyers? You know, can you make a bunch of fairy tokens? Can you make angels? You know, any of those things really take away that advantage of the Soaring Thought Thief. Because that tends to be the card that's going to be really getting in there every turn and really kind of gumming up the work, so to speak. But then there's also cards like Maul of the Skyclaves that can turn anything into a flyer and gives it first strike. And they usually don't have a way to remove artifacts and enchantments. So once you stick one, that can be a thorn in their side for the rest of the game. And first strike means you also don't have to worry about Death Touch on those enforcers. So keep that in mind as well. And then, just to wrap this whole thing up, if you want a budget option for a deck, consider something like the Orzhov Enchantments decks, because they're actually pretty low in cost. They play a lot of commons and uncommons, and they have cards that keep coming back from the yard, which also is beneficial when playing against rogues. You could also have a couple of tricky ways to make some big flyers, and you have a fair amount of removal. So though the deck may lack against a few other matchups, it's actually solid against rogues. But all that being said, let's not sell the deck short. Like, it is a deck that's versatile and has a few different options, and it can be built a few different ways. So rogues can make adjustments and still be reasonable, if not competitive for the majority of this standard format, and maybe into the next one. And they might get some bonuses because who knows, there could be a rogue or two that comes out that actually fits that deck, and then that's going to be a whole other thing we have to adjust to. But for now, I hope these options help you out. I hope they give you some deck building ideas. Hope they just give you a little more insight into some things that can help you fight through the rogue menace. And remember, if you haven't, please like this video, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. And if you want to go ahead and come join us in our Discord, you can come talk to us there. Maybe you need help still, bring your deck list. We'll help you out, give you some tips, and help you take down these rogues. You can get that link down in the description below. But that's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.